In June 2025, Israel began a large-scale bombing campaign against Iran following the expiration of a 60-day deadline set by US President Trump for finding a diplomatic solution to Iran's nuclear program. During the initial phase, the Israeli Air Force and intelligence services crippled vital Iranian military and energy-related installations and eliminated numerous high-ranking Iranian officials and nuclear scientists. And soon, the US targeted 3 of Iran's most important nuclear facilities. While both US and Israeli officials claimed that the main goal of the military campaign was to eliminate Iran's nuclear capabilities, the scale of the military actions and comments made by Israeli and US leaders indicated that achieving regime change in Iran was the actual goal. This was further reinforced by the Israeli codename given to the military campaign, Operation Rising Lion, a clear reference to the pre-revolution flag of Iran. But then the situation suddenly de-escalated. After symbolic Iranian retaliation, a truce was negotiated. However, this conflict is probably far from over. A diplomatic settlement seems to be no closer than before, and Trump already hinted at the fact that using military force will be back on the table if no deal is reached, possibly trying for regime change then. But then what? Whenever the central authority of a state in the Middle East collapses, dormant ethno-religious tensions begin to resurface, as they did before in Iraq and Syria, and Iran's ethno-religious mosaic is no less complex. Many ethnic groups call Iran their home, with some of these groups having a history of separatist tendencies which could be exploited by outside actors. So the big question is, if Iran is further weakened, could we witness a major outbreak of separatism in Iran? To find out, we will take a closer look at Iran's demographics and identify the 5 ethnic groups that are the likeliest to experience a rise of separatist sentiment, starting with the most obvious and ending with an ethnic group you probably never heard of. But before we jump in, aren't you ready to finally stop being a spectator and start making some world-shaking moves on your own? Allow me to introduce this video's sponsor, Supremacy World War III, a free online strategy game where you command a real nation in modern, global PvP conflict against up to 99 other players in real time. These matches can run over weeks and give you plenty of opportunities to redraw the map. Sorry United Nations, there is a new boss in town. Be prepared to craft your strategies, plan betrayals and make shady backroom deals while building up your military with tanks, jets and submarines. And because Supremacy World War III runs seamlessly on both PC and mobile, you can command your armies on a desktop war room or launch surprise attacks from your phone while you perform your natural obligations. To give you an edge, you can download Supremacy World War III using my link in the comments below, and you can get a free elite bomber, a $25 US value unit, completely free for the next 30 days. With your very own elite bomber, you can conquer the world and finally tell your dad that you are actually winning, as long as you don't end up in front of an international court, of course. And you'll also be helping this channel, thanks to Supremacy World War III. And now back to Iran. One thing we need to understand about Iran is that the country is huge. This becomes clear when we superimpose it over the United States or Europe, and its terrain is also varied, with arid mountains, lush valleys, deadly deserts and rugged shorelines. With that size and geography comes striking ethnic, cultural and religious diversity among its around 91 million inhabitants. The core of the population is formed by ethnic Persians. They are a people with a rich history that speak Farsi, an Iranian language, and are overwhelmingly Shia Muslims and make up roughly 60% of the population. Additionally, there are other closely related Iranian peoples, Lurs, Gilaks and Mazanis. Despite having distinct regional identities, they are culturally and religiously intertwined with the Iranian nation and are closely related to Persians. Therefore, none of these groups has shown serious separatist tendencies so far. Then there are other, much smaller minorities, such as the Kashkai Turks, Turkmen and Armenians. Although more culturally distinct, their numbers are limited and their communities too geographically isolated to pursue separatism. That leaves 5 major ethnic groups whose aspirations could become a major challenge for a destabilized Iran. The first group are the around 7 to 10 million Kurds, mostly living in northwestern Iran, but they can also be found in neighboring Turkey, Iraq and Syria. Although the language is closely related to Persian, their history and cultural identity is markedly distinct. Their dream of an independent Kurdish state took shape in the early 1900s, but it never materialized, and so the Kurds have remained one of the largest nations without their own state. In the past, Iran has faced several Kurdish uprisings, The largest in recent memory erupted in 1979, right after the Islamic Revolution toppled the Iranian monarchy. Various Kurdish groups began calling for autonomy or outright independence, and the situation quickly turned violent. The subsequent conflict between Kurdish separatists and the forces of the new Islamic Republic lasted well into the mid-1990s, during which between 10 and 50,000 people lost their lives and more than 200,000 people were displaced. The insurgency was eventually suppressed, yet Kurdish demands for autonomy never completely disappeared. They once again grew louder in the 2000s after Iraqi and Syrian Kurds carved out de facto self-governing regions. If Iran's government is further weakened, Kurdish factions from outside would have an easier time to funnel arms to their kin in hopes that they can repeat that success. How far they would go would definitely hinge on Turkey's response. For decades, Turkey and Iran cooperated to contain Kurdish separatism in the region, but should the Iranian government's authority break down, Turkey might intervene militarily as it did before in Syria and Iraq. The second group are the roughly 4 to 5 million Baloch inhabiting southeastern Iran, with many more in western Pakistan and southern Afghanistan. They speak an Iranian language that is distantly related to Farsi and are mostly Sunni Muslims, unlike Iran's Shia majority. For centuries, the Baloch actually had their own states, the largest of which having been the Khanate of Kalat, but over time their homeland was partitioned. Western Balochistan was conquered by Iran in the 1800s, while the east went to British India and finally to Pakistan. But the idea of an independent Balochistan never died. Since the partition of the Baloch lands, there has been an insurgency in the region which has been most intense in Pakistan, but has also become a serious problem in Iran since the 2000s, which has been fueled by socio-economic neglect, heavy-handed policing and religious discrimination. Today, there are numerous militant Baloch separatist groups that have staged bombings, kidnappings and raids on Iranian military positions. And similarly to the Kurdish movement, the Baloch groups profit from the cross-border nature of their movement. The insurgency even managed to create a political crisis in early 2024 between Iran and Pakistan, after Iranian forces launched a drone strike on militants in Pakistan, to which Pakistan responded in kind. Despite all of this, both Iran and Pakistan are on the same side here, as they both seek to stop Baloch separatism. But should the Iranian government be further weakened by outside actors, Baloch militants would likely take advantage and entrench themselves in southeastern Iran, which would be a nightmare scenario for Pakistan. The third group are the around 1.5 million Ahvazi Arabs living in the oil-rich Khuzestan province, centered around the city of Ahvaz. Initially, the Arabs here enjoyed wide-reaching autonomy within Iran, but beginning in the mid-1920s, the Iranian government began to cut away at their rights and suppress their identity. Tensions between the local Arab and Persian population persisted for decades and fueled separatist sentiments among the Arabs, which was further strengthened by the rise of Arab nationalism across the region. But then, the 1979 Islamic Revolution happened, which diffused tensions significantly as the new theocratic government put the shared Shia Muslim beliefs at the center of state governance. How successful they really were was soon tested in 1980 by the then leader of Iraq, Saddam Hussein. He claimed to seek liberation for Khuzestan's Arabs and planned to annex the valuable province into Iraq, but his war against Iran ultimately failed, partly because the Arabs in Khuzestan mostly sided with the new Iranian government. Despite this, some separatist sentiment has persisted. Militant groups are still active within Khuzestan, with their biggest attacks in recent years having been an attack on an Iranian military parade in 2018, during which 25 people lost their lives. This shows that the potential for conflict is still very much there, and things could really start to heat up if the theocratic Iranian government is weakened or even toppled by outside interference, because then the unifying effect of Shia-centric governance will be gone. The fourth group are the between 15 to 20 million Azeris who inhabit much of northern Iran. They are the country's largest minority, and although they speak Azerbaijani Turkish, which is closely related to Turkish from Turkey, they nonetheless share deep cultural, religious and historic ties with the other peoples of Iran. Historically, the empires of Iran used to rule over most Azeri inhabited lands until the Russians conquered the Caucasus region in the 1800s, and since then, the Iranian region of Azerbaijan and the country of Azerbaijan diverged in their political history. Nonetheless, they still consider themselves the same people, and in the early 1900s, all Azeri settled regions experienced an uptick in nationalism. The first taste of independence was given to the Iranian Azeris by the Soviets in 1945 after they established the Azerbaijan People's Government, but this statelet was short-lived and reintegrated into Iran when the Soviets withdrew just a year later. From then on, separatist sentiments among Azeris remained very faint. For one, the Azeris are deeply integrated into all aspects of Iranian cultural and political life, with many Iranian leaders having at least partly Azeri roots. For another, most Azeris are proud of their historic contribution to the Iranian nation, which forms part of their identity. However, it's not all rainbows and sunshine. Every now and then there have been protests across Azeri-populated areas demanding an expansion of language rights or to stop Iranian support of Armenia in the conflict with Azerbaijan, and occasionally these protests resulted in arrests and police crackdowns. Still, there are no active militant organizations that call for Azeri secession like with the previous three ethnic groups, so the separatist tendencies of Azeris within Iran are often exaggerated. Nonetheless, there is pro-separatist sentiment coming from outside Iran as well, especially from the country of Azerbaijan. Since Azerbaijan gained independence from the Soviet Union in 1991, the Iranian government has been deeply worried about its potential to heighten separatist aspirations among Iranian Azeris, and these fears are not completely unfounded. Azerbaijan's capital Baku is home to several exiled organizations promoting South Azerbaijani autonomy or outright separatism. And since the conflict over the region of Karabakh with Armenia seems to be mostly over, it's conceivable that Azerbaijan will start focusing its attention to the border with Iran. Lastly, we have the fifth group, the around 1 million Talysh, an ethnic group you probably never heard of. They live in northern Iran along the Caspian Sea, but they can also be found in neighboring Azerbaijan and speak an Iranian language related to Persian. Historically, the Talysh actually had their own semi-independent Khanate, but like the Azeris, their homeland was eventually split between Iran and the Russian Empire. Now comes the interesting part. The Talysh that live in Iran today have no notable history of separatism or demands for autonomy, so why are they on this list? It's because the Talysh in neighboring Azerbaijan do. During the Soviet period, the Talysh faced repression and assimilation attempts into the Azeri majority, but when the Soviet Union collapsed, their leaders declared the short-lived Talysh Mugan Autonomous Republic during a period of political instability in Azerbaijan. However, it was quickly dismantled by Azerbaijani forces. Since then, tensions between the Talysh and the Azerbaijani government have persisted. But if this is the case in Azerbaijan only, why talk about the Talysh now? Well, it's because the Talysh in Iran could find themselves in a difficult position in case separatist sentiment spread among the Iranian Azeri population. Should the Iranian Azeris at some point pursue an autonomous region, independence, or even union with the Republic of Azerbaijan, Talysh communities might fear an inclusion in such an entity, and that could cause them to seek their own autonomous status. In addition, Talysh networks that have been exiled in Europe could become more active in Iran as well, further reinforcing the idea of a Talysh state or at least an autonomous region. Still, given their rather small population and limited nationalist infrastructure, a purely Talysh separatist movement in Iran is unlikely without a broader ethnic uprising in the region. Now that we have looked at these 5 ethnic groups, it's clear that Iran is no stranger to separatism with varying degrees of intensity. Yet until now, it was always able to control or suppress these aspirations. The big question is, will they still be able to do so if the pressure on Iran keeps increasing from the outside? For decades, the political leadership in both the US and Israel was convinced that the theocratic government of Iran could be overthrown by the common people if Iran is sufficiently weakened, possibly by leveraging the anti-government and often pro-monarchy Iranian diaspora under the leadership of the exiled Crown Prince of Iran. And yet, despite the fact that Iran regularly experienced protests against various repressive government policies for years, the possibility of another revolution occurring within Iran seems to have been massively exaggerated. Instead, what we saw during the Israeli and American military operation was a rally around the flag effect, during which most of the Iranian population supported the government, at least for the duration of the attack. Because of this, both the US and Israel may now re-evaluate their strategy towards Iran, and instead of betting on an overthrow of the government by the public, they might decide to increase support for separatist groups within Iran to weaken it more effectively. Whatever happens, one thing seems clear. The 12-day war between Iran and Israel may be over, but the broader conflict between Iran, Israel and the US will remain a powder keg in the Middle East. This was just a brief overview of the situation. If you want me to dive deeper into one of these movements, let me know in the comments below. A special thanks to Supremacy World War III for sponsoring this video, and remember to check out my link in the comments below to get a free elite bomber after downloading the game. Also a big thank you to all my patrons and channel members. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.